It's SDL. Happy Halloween. You saw the pumpkin. That means it's Halloween. That's what pumpkins mean. And Russ is doing things to the pumpkin that he shouldn't do. Some of those things are questionable in their legality, but whatever. Hey, we're back from the Wild West Hackin' Fest. We survived the wilds of South Dakota, even though it was like 17 degrees. If you watched last week's episode, you saw me get really cold. I was turning my nose. I watched that. My nose kept getting redder and redder, and I wasn't even drinking.
Yeah, that was whiskey, Doug.
Yeah, well, yeah, was that what it was? Yeah, it was like everybody was there. All the like celebrity people from the industry were in South Dakota. So John Strand, thank you, John Strand, for having us out there. It was lots of fun. They had lots of great talks, so if you missed it, and they had an awesome ballroom, if you heard us talk about that last time, with all the cool labs that were there. I wish I had had more time to do that instead of shaking people's hands, but I had to shake people's hands and
even
hand out cards, yeah, even people that had just sneezed in their hand. It was kind of nasty, but, you know, that's okay. It was very fun. If you get a chance to go next year, you probably should, so you should start planning now, because I think they're going to have it again. I heard them talking about the 2018. So, but it is Halloween. So we decided to talk about a Halloween-related thing, which is encryption.
Hey, all right.
Is that Halloween-related?
Sure.
It's Halloween-related at my house. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, it's like I'm going as a Turing machine.
I'm dressed up as encryption right now.
There you are. Yeah, me too. So, but I wore my Wild West Hackin' shirt, and several people were saying like the logo is upside down, and I was like, yeah, that's so you can look at the TCP headers while you're working.
Yeah, while you're working. You
can look down if you don't know them already.
Yeah.
So, you know, here's the whole. This is the TCP header. And this is the IP header, so if you're working on packet captures, you got the whole thing laid out right there for you. So, but we're continuing our discussion about encryption this week to talk about how Wi-Fi encryption works and some of the things leading up to hopefully ultimately talking about cryptocurrency in a couple of shows, and that should be pretty fun. So stick around, and we'll be with you then.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. And you type in AAA porn or whatever it is you're typing in. I'm sorry. I was at a PG show.
And I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here because somebody needs to know what's going on.
That's right.
Okay. So
now somebody has to drink this.
I think it's another day. It's another episode.
Yeah, he's looking at the wrong camera.
Oh, you put my camera over here. Cut. Basically, forget you ever saw that. I think actually forgetting you ever saw that would really be a good idea at this point. Halloweeny, whatever it is. I don't know.
It's
confusing.
Halloween.
It's another holiday. It's another day. It's another episode. We're back. We're back in Rhode Island doing all those Rhode Island things, surviving the storms that hit. Then everybody's power went out. Mine did not.
Mine didn't either.
I got a generator now and like a plug-in and all this fancy stuff. And since that, we've never had a power outage. So it's like, okay. But anyway, so Wi-Fi. So the first thing I'm going to talk about was how signals and Wi-Fi actually work, because some people had asked about that even. And it is an issue. So the way Wi-Fi works as a signal is radio frequency. So it's no different than AM, FM, all that other kind of stuff that's been going on since the dawn of time. And it literally is being sent through the airways just like AM, FM radio is sent through the airways, or TV signals or anything else is sent through the airways. It's a wave. It's going through the air. And basically all of this stuff got defined in a spec a long time ago called 802.11. This is an IEEE spec. And 802.11 defined all the frequencies that would be used for Wi-Fi transmissions on networks. And there's all these subparts, and you may have seen some of that stuff. If you go to like look at Wi-Fi routers, you'll see them say this is 802.11n or A or B, C. And we've seen those things kind of progress, and they get faster, so the different specs, but they're running out of them, so they're going to get down to the end. All this stuff works at 2.4 to 5 gigahertz, which is a lot different than like regular radio you'd listen to in your car. So it's a much. Thank you. I'm gonna drink that in a minute, and it's gonna be in my lap with a bunch of coffee, and then I'll have like a pickled
coffee pants,
a pickled pumpkin coffee pants kind of experience on Halloween. Yeah, that'll be. Then I can just go as the great mishap to the Halloween party.
Charlie Brown.
I stained my pants.
Oh man.
No, Linus. But
wouldn't be the first time, right, Doug?
That's right. Get Peppermint Patty in here, and we'll have a discussion. but So Wi-Fi frequencies are out there. You can grab them out of the air. And that's so you have any frequency stuff for us, Russ?
Yeah, they usually operate, like you said, between 2.4 and 5.8, I think it is. And your cell phones, your microwaves, they operate around that same band as well, that can cause destructive interference. So if you think of like a wave, just like a wave like this, and the bands can move over in megahertz or in the spectrum, and if you get two bands that are the same wave, it can cause destructive interference. So that's why in the old days, if you had a cordless phone and you were talking on the cordless phone, and you put the microwave on, you'd get static.
Right.
And so,
which was kind of scary.
Yeah, it was very scary.
It actually isn't, because it's like really the transformer in the microwave emitting EMI, not like radiation. My mother always thought it was radiation, and I was like, it's not radiation, we'd all be dead.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing too is people think about, the higher the letter, like A was less than B, B was less than G, G was less than N, and then now there's the new AC standard and uses beamforming and stuff. The higher the letter, the better the technology, and that was sort of true. But what you have to remember is, as you get stronger, you also get the fidelity of the signal over an area gets weaker. So AC, while that's one of the latest standards, has very strong signal strength close to it, but it only gave you something like 250 to I don't know if it was 250 or 500 feet or something like that, which was less than say G.
Right.
So that's why if you're in an open space, you always want to go with the the G or the N would be a better standard.
Well, the A was a point to point. I mean, you could use it for other things, but it was often used for point to point, because I have like a Cisco device that you can really crank the milliwatts up, and it's so strong that I think you could cook a seabird that flies through the signal, because it's kind of scary too. But I used to use point-to-point in my offices for my house, so I had that type A on the point-to-point, and then I was using like G, to blanket the area with all that stuff. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, and to think about it, if you take a flashlight, a regular standard flashlight, and you shine it on a wall from about 10 feet away, the wall is going to light up in a relatively big circle. But if you move 100 feet away, you're probably not going to see what's on that wall with the flashlight, right? Because you're so far away and the light has been dispersed so much. But if you take a laser, right, like a laser pointer, and you shine it from 100 feet away, that wall is going to get illuminated, and you'll be able to see, provided it's written big enough, what's on that wall, because it's a more focused beam.
And at my house, 3 cats will hit the wall.
And 3 cats will hit the wall and try to kill each other, and the dot.
No, they'll just go after the dot. They do work together as a team when they have something to kill.
Wow.
They don't really like each other, but when there's something to kill, they work like a beautiful team. All 3 of them work it. I mean, it's really interesting to watch, actually, because normally they don't like each other too much. But then there's something, a dot or a mouse or whatever, and it's like all 3 of them are just, they just like, okay, you take point kind of thing.
Nice.
The other thing that goes on in these different 802.11s is what is called frequency hopping. And because so many people have Wi-Fi now, you will actually get interference from your neighbors. You get interference from cell phones, or not from cordless phones in your house. All that stuff starts to cause interference on certain frequencies, and it's also a safety thing, so that it's harder for people to actually grab your signal, because it's constantly changing the negotiations between it. But typically your home devices and the Soho devices will actually try to find the best channel to operate on. And that involves a term called a WAP. So a WAP, WAP, is a wireless access device that, I mean, it is what you would normally call a Wi-Fi router. So it's just a gadget that you plug into your network that is essentially listening for people to try to connect. And those are, I mean, you have to have something like that, and you have to have a Wi-Fi NIC. So you can go buy, you can buy Wi-Fi dongles that you plug into devices, or whatever.
Dongles are great.
Yeah, you can buy an actual NIC that you put in the machine, it's got a little antenna sticking out of it. You can buy all kinds of gadgets that would let you connect to, listen for, and to connect to those kinds of signals. Most modern devices, your cell phone, your laptop, whatever you're carrying around, probably have Wi-Fi built into them already. They have a NIC built onto the motherboard. But older stuff, we used to have to plug things into to get Wi-Fi signals. And I used to set these things up all over the place to try to bridge and connect and do all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, your cell phone now can also be used as a WAP or Wi-Fi device.
That's right.
That you can feed to any kind of tablet that doesn't have it. So.
And we do that a lot.
Yeah,
We
did it in South Dakota.
We were doing that in South Dakota because they had unsecured Wi-Fi,
Oh, they sure did.
and so we were using our phones as WAPs so that we could connect our laptops to our phones and use our cellular data, which is encrypted up to the tower. So you actually have a form of encryption there as well. The other piece of this is called SSID, which is a service. The service set identifier. And service set identifier is essentially what most people would call the name of their network. So when you turn your Wi-Fi on and you start looking at all the networks around you and you see things like, you know, whatever, like one of mine is called FBI surveillance, which I always find amusing to no end.
There's one in Providence that says, "Stop having sex, we can hear you."
Yeah, my friend's is named Ass Clown, and and one of his neighbors was complaining about it. They were like, "What is this? It's something weird," and I was like,
"Why don't you come and find out?"
Yeah.
We all float down here.
Yeah, and now, and people put up all kinds of funny names. But there's also an idea of SSID spoofing, and it is sometimes people would consider not advertising their SSID. That's an option you can set on your WAP.
I do that too.
Yeah. Because if people can see the names of these, and we'll talk a little bit later about how the encryption works, the SSID is actually a salt in the encryption process. So that name itself can actually be used to try to break encryption on that. And the other thing, of course, is people spoofing SSIDs, which is a different issue. So if I actually take my laptop and I go to the airport and I turn my laptop into a WAP or my phone and I set the SSID Chicago O'Hare free Wi-Fi, people will literally connect to it right away. And if you connect to one of those, I literally can grab all your packets off my laptop. So I can just redirect those packets into a file, and I can capture everything that people who connected to it with. And they don't know the difference because I can make it a WAP. They're using my data, but I could do that with my phone. We were fooling around with this at a concert, and we changed the SSID
Ed Sheeran.
To Ed Sheeran. Yeah. And people were trying to airdrop photos to my daughter's phone. It was people in the audience who thought they were, the guys up on stage, and people thought, oh, it's Ed Sheeran. Here's, But we did collect a lot of illegal selfies, but which we have for a fee available.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no, not really. That would be a violation. No need to call, John. Everything's cool. So the next piece of this is what are the channels. So each of these devices has a channel that can be used, and these channels are sub-frequencies of the 2.4 or 5 band. So there's all these little sub-slices in there that are defined by the FCC, and the channel can then be set to those little sub-frequencies, and that way you can try to pick one that has the least amount of interference.
Just like you used to be able to do on your cordless phone. I think they gave you 10 channels at...
maybe yours. Mine had 2.
500 megahertz. They gave you like 10, whatever, 2 to 4 or 10 channels. And then as they got up in frequencies, then they increased the number of channels. I think now for AC, I have... if I go into my wireless router, it's 128 channels I can choose from.
We had kind of a frequency war with one of our neighbors once because he was stepping on our phones, and I started sort of upping the milliwattage of all my outputs to sort of squash him, and then he got all upset about it because he didn't know what was happening. He was like, and I was like, I don't know, it must be sunspots or the CIA or something. He's like, none of our phones in our house work now. And I'm like, yeah, isn't that awful?
Isn't that awful?
It's just terrible. Mine work fine.
Intentionally creating destructive interference.
Which, I'll be honest with you, that is actually illegal. I learned that. I went to a meeting with the Federal Prison Bureau, and any attempt to manipulate the signal is a violation of the FCC codes. And it actually is you could get arrested for
punishable by death.
I asked the Prison Bureau why they don't just jam cell phones. They were talking about how much trouble they have with cell phones in prison. And they said people were using cats. They were using drones. They said that people would literally come running toward the prison fence and throw phones over the wall so that people could get them. And he said they seized like thousands of phones.
Wow.
And I said, why don't you just jam the signal so that the phones are useless? And he said the FCC wouldn't allow them to do it.
I remember back about 7 or 8 years ago when a colleague of mine at the university was asking about how he could create a no cell phone zone because students would be always texting.
Right.
And whatever. And so, now we just kind of deal with it, And in Great Britain, I can't remember where specifically, they were testing this anti-cell phone paint, where they would paint on walls and it would dampen the signal. And of course, movie theaters, which unfortunately now they don't have that. But the movie theaters were investing lots of money in this because they were getting angry that the customers were getting angry in the movies saying, oh, these kids or people are on their phone all the time. It's not always
and
kids.
They were jamming it.
And they were trying to make a jam, and then got into this big thing, and nobody
it's a big thing here, and they won't let you do it. So
no, they sure won't.
And in fact, possession of devices for jamming signals is very questionable.
No signal suppression.
So be very careful if you decide to build these. There are plans on the internet. You can build these kind of things, and people build them as pranks. They build them to be annoying or whatever. But you can get in a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah, and to look at there's this thing called SNR, signal to noise ratio, that you want to look at, and you want to sort of you want to maximize your signal while reducing the amount of noise. That way you get the best possible signal with the least amount of interference. And you can use things like I think there's an app that I use on my Android device called Wi-Fi Analyzer or Spectrum Analyzer, and it will monitor the signal to noise ratio of certain frequencies on your Wi-Fi network. You can also buy an expensive, I think Fluke makes the expensive. They're like $4,000, but they're like good. Those are good. Those are the professional grade. But if you want something to play around with, Spectrum Analyzer or Wireless Analyzer is free. And you can download it.
And we'll talk about some other things you can use to examine these kind of networks as well. But so all that leads to so what's the problem? I mean, why is there any issue with Wi-Fi that we would even be talking about? Because theoretically we're talking about encryption, and that's why there's a problem. Because Wi-Fi signals, I mean, basically when you connect to a WAP, the signal is sent in the clear. That means all the traffic is just sitting there in the air. And grabbing that traffic is not necessarily illegal because it's being broadcast. And that's a little bit different than wiretapping someone, but ask your lawyer before doing it. But at the end of the day, anybody in the area that has a promiscuous NIC can actually grab the traffic out of the air. So there are all kinds of toolkits you can buy to snort, snarf, or air snort, whichever term you want to use, packets that are being sent through the Wi-Fi system. And that doesn't even mean you have to compromise the WAP or spoof an SSID. It can literally just mean you take your laptop and sit down in Starbucks and turn it on, and you start grabbing the signals that are being sent back and forth and dumping that traffic into a file.
Text file, yeah.
And guess what? Wireshark and other tools like that will do exactly that kind of thing for you. You need a little add-on to Wireshark to actually do that effectively with Wi-Fi signals. But when you're grabbing Wi-Fi signals, you can grab all the packets out of the air. And if they're not encrypted, meaning that they're just raw sent, then you can actually see what's in those packets, and you can see logins and passwords, and you can see what people are downloading. You saw us on Wireshark shows reconstructing JPEGs from the data stream. And you could literally do all that by grabbing what people were doing out there in the world. So what happens is you have to figure out a way to encrypt these signals. Now, the first thing that I'll say before I say anything else is remember, use a VPN. Don't not use VPN. I don't care if it's encrypted or not. If it's got a VPN on it, your traffic is being encrypted down a tunnel that is going through there. So even if the Wi-Fi is wide open, the VPN is in itself encrypted. So anybody who's grabbing your traffic is getting encrypted packets, not in the clear packets.
Yeah. We did an episode on that, too.
We did do an episode.
Number 1, 2, 3, or 4.
It's way back there. So you can go back in the history.
Look for the straw and the drink.
Right. So what all that leads to is how do you tell if something is encrypted? And that can be a bit of a problem with Wi-Fi networks because Wi-Fi networks have two basic kinds of encryption that are being used that are available anyway, WEP and WPA2. These are the two. There's other kinds of it that have been around like WPA, and there's also WPA Enterprise and stuff like that. But typically out in public, you are basically doing this. Now, sometimes people will tell you that it has a password, so therefore it is encrypted. Answer, not really. You can set a password on the Wi-Fi which doesn't necessarily create encryption. It may. Some Soho devices, when you set the password, it automatically uses that as a part of an encryption key, and therefore the signal is actually encrypted at that point. Others, not so much. So WEP has a feature where you can set no encryption. The reason people didn't want encryption was because it hurts the speed to some degree. Today, that's not really a problem, and it's just so dangerous that I wouldn't do it. But could somebody see that password? Yeah. Can they get the passwords off the systems? All that and more, you bet. So what else? HTTPS.
Oh, by the way, WEP and WPA2 now have both been cracked.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Yep,
at
I know. I just wanted to.
So if you're using websites, so just I always like to kind of temper this with the lack of panic. There's this sort of immediate panic of, oh, no. But then there's also the sort of back-end explanation for maybe not. So even if you've been using unencrypted Wi-Fi, yes, there's all kinds of threats associated with that. But if you are going to most websites today, when you go to enter data that's secured, that is usually sent via HTTPS rather than HTTP. So even though the page itself says HTTP, there may be pieces of that page, like, say, your login and password or your credit card number or your checkout or your shopping cart or whatever, that are encrypted. It doesn't have to be, but most people have kind of gotten away from that open, send it a clear model. So that means if you bought something on the internet, the person sniffing might be able to see what you bought. They could maybe see the picture of what you bought, or they might even be able to see your shopping cart. But at least in theory, hopefully that merchant has set HTTPS on. So even though they got the HTTPS packets, now they're encrypted. So they would have to crack HTTPS, which is that doable? Yes. Everything can be broken. Is it easy? No. So now it's kind of turned into a like, well, could you possibly do that?
So what do we do?
Oh, so what do we do? Yeah. I thought you were going to talk about something. Russ turned and faced the camera, and I was like, Russ is going to talk.
I was rearranging the pumpkins.
Oh, he rearranged the pumpkins. Okay. Thank you, Russ. The pumpkins are now rearranged. So what do you do? Well, obviously the first thing is VPN. So if you're on a VPN, all your traffic is encrypted. Yay. That will save you from really worrying about this to some degree, because now people are going to have to crack the VPN encryption, which, yes, that can be done. Is it easy? No. Is it something anybody can do? Probably not. You're talking about people that actually have practiced, planned, and are trying to do this. So it's probably not as likely that all that stuff's going to be cracked. You can also check then the properties of your Wi-Fi connection. If you check the properties on whatever kind of system you have, you can see if the signal is being encrypted or not. So that's another step you can take to see if you're just on some kind of free Wi-Fi. If it didn't have a password, it's definitely not encrypted. I mean, at least that I've seen, that you're never going to see that stuff going on. So hopefully then you're also on your home system using some kind of encrypted system, which typically is WPA2. So there's a lot of other notes about this stuff on the show notes, so if you want to read some more about it. But WEP in and of itself was cracked. There is actually tools called WEP Crack. You can go download them. It's not very strong encryption to start with. It was at the time it came out. It had 128-bit encryption, which sounds good, but it really wasn't. It uses RC4. There are numerous cracks available for how this is done. It's got different kind of problems with that. But I really want to go ahead and talk about WPA2 as we run out of time. WPA2 is the standard of encryption that is used on SOHO and enterprise devices pretty much today. There are some other rare ones, but for the most part, people are using WPA2 types of encryption. Can it be broken? And the answer is, well, yeah, unfortunately, it has been broken
recently,
several different ways. But there are two recent ones that just came up that everybody was talking about. One of them is called Hole 196. And Hole 196 was a way to basically create what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. You connect to a Wi-Fi node, and then this person actually jumps in there, and they usurp your connection, essentially, is what happens. And by doing that, they could then receive the traffic that was meant for you. Now, again, if you're on a VPN, that does them no good. They can usurp the connection, but now they're just getting stuff that they don't have the key for. So the VPN stuff comes in, and the other end of the VPN is going to disconnect immediately, and all your traffic's just going to die. So the VPN is going to defeat Hole 196 attacks. Another one is called a forward secrecy attack, which is essentially where someone has to get the pre-shared key. How do they get that? Well, they may compromise the device because it's got default password set, all kinds of different ways they could get that. And then they use that key to decrypt all the packets that they receive. So they could actually then air snort you and decrypt those using that pre-shared key, because if they have it, well, they have it. And then, of course, the big one that everybody was talking about recently was called crack, K-R-A-C-K. Crack was a pretty interesting thing to look at. basically what happened was it was a flaw in certain systems. Not all systems were subject to it.
Android devices. I think.
Yeah, Android devices in particular was subject to this. And they were able to slowly match the encryption. So they were just looking at all this traffic, and then they slowly build a matched up set. And once they do that, they actually can decrypt things that are coming in. And once they do those kind of things, well, then that's the end of that. The only other one I had on my list was called Duck. And Duck was basically a flaw in one of the ways that they do password encryption keys. And when they did that, people were able to guess the seed. They were able to get the random number seed, which is called a nonce, if you've never heard that term. And that random number seed was being used the same. So it was hard-coded. So it was using the same seed every time, and it was just a bad design flaw. And you'll kind of see that over and over again in the world, is that most of these cracks are not necessarily flaws in the encryption themselves, because like WPA2 uses a pretty good encryption scheme that would be pretty hard to crack. But when a coder, a developer, or someone doesn't develop this properly, it creates exploits that can then be used to crack the encryption, which is not true cracks, but it actually allows them to decrypt that. So
use a VPN.
So the answer to all this, as we start to wrap up with Mr. Pumpkin, is that you should use a VPN. I mean, we've talked about, if you want to know how to do that on your phone, it's easy enough to do. You can jump on our other show and check that out. And if you want to do it on your laptop, desktop, it's, again, very easy to do. There's many different products that you can get. They're cheap. And you can, just always use a VPN. I use one called Hide My Ass, which is a very cheap product. And I don't know that it's better or worse than other products, but and they're not endorsing my show. You know who you are. But if they want to endorse my show, I'd like that. But they're not, so that's just the one I choose to use, and it runs automatically. So the minute I connect to Wi-Fi, the VPN automatically connects to the nearest VPN node, and that means all my traffic is encrypted. There's traffic inside the VPN and HTTPS that's encrypted again, and if the actual Wi-Fi is encrypted, it's triple encrypted. So it's going to be really challenging for somebody to get it. Can the NSA come after me? Well, they probably could. And if nation states are after you, well, don't call me, please, and stay the hell away. But if it's just average people that are trying to cause you problems, that's what it would be. So anything else, Russ, on that?
No, just, again, VPN, and look at we have previous shows talking about the different types of VPNs that you can use and stuff like that.
So Mr. Pumpkin.
He's smoking that pumpkin.
Yeah.
Is that a bong?
Yeah. Mr. Pumpkin says, Happy Halloween!
Halloween!
Bye. See you next time.